Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Marcus Hayes and today is a big day for Esther, my ST170 powered Mk1 Escort, because today she's going on the dyno. Right, so as I mentioned in the last video, I'm going to be borrowing a few parts from Maud, my Maud Mk2 Escort, to take with us to the dyno today, just in case anything fails on Esther. So I'm going to take the battery, the coil pack and the HT leads. The other thing what could be handy is a crank sensor, but that's down there. Alright, let's get out of here. So I'm at the garage. Looks like it's about to rain, but that was expected. I'm going to start with replacing these rear brakes, which can be a bit of a nightmare with the springs and stuff. Right, who noticed my mistake with the leading and trailing brake shoes? I've rectified it now. And this side is all done as well. Cat has arrived. Cat's never been to a rolling road session before, so one thing I do definitely want to do is an oil change. I do. Alright, so oil change is done. I've checked the gearbox oil, that's fine. I've checked the diff oil, and that's fine. Cat is just pumping up the tyres for me because most of those are flat. Next, I'm going to bleed the rear brakes. Right, so with Esther back on the ground, she's as ready as she's going to be for the dyno. I've been joined by my recovery man, Che. Now, Che owns a company called SWAN Autos, and I'll leave his contact details in the description of this video. If you need any recovery or any transportation of your car, definitely give him a shout. He's definitely my first choice when it comes to transporting cars anyway. So I suppose all that's left to do now is to get Esther onto the truck. It's absolutely pouring with rain, but you can't control the weather. So I suppose I'll see you at Surrey Rolling Road, mate.
Yes, see you there.
Right, so we're taking Esther to Surrey Rolling Road in Farnborough, and she's going to be tuned by a guy called Chris Todd, who, as I mentioned in my last video, owns a Subaru Impreza powered rear-wheel drive Mk1 Fiesta that now runs in the 8s at Santa Pod. Those of you who've been watching my videos a while will remember that I actually got offered a free remap by MOTORSPORT Electronics, who are the guys who supplied the ME221 ECU that I've got fitted to Esther, but it just worked out a lot more convenient for me to take it to Surrey Rolling Road and have Chris do it. And I've had Chris Todd work on my engines in the past, and he's really good at what he does. I would like to one day go down to see the guys at MOTORSPORT Electronics though and make a video. And what would be really cool is if I could actually drive Esther down there to see him. Right, so we've arrived at Surrey Rolling Road. Don't think Chris is here yet. Che's just reversing the truck in now. Right, so she's all strapped down and ready. This is Chris Todd, who's going to be tuning. Alright, so Chris did just come out and say he's having a bit of trouble with the VVT. Yeah, he's just going to have a look through the settings on the ECU and try and figure out what's going on. If it is the VVT solenoid that's faulty, that is one thing I didn't bring a spare of. Esther just decided to empty her radiator through the overflow because some idiot didn't put the fan switch plug back on. And that idiot is me. Alright, so we've put some more water in the rad and I've done up the Jubilee clips and stuff and confirmed that the fan is now working. 32.4 horsepower. Yeah, we need a little bit more than that. What's happening is the ECU is losing sync between the crank and the cam sensor at 5,000 RPM. And it looks like it's probably something to do with the crank sensor. We thought it might have been something to do with the cam sensor, but when Chris rules that out in the software, it's still doing the same thing. So Unless there's something going on with electrical noise interfering with the sensor, I reckon it's probably the crank sensor. I was going to nick the crank sensor off my dad's Focus and try and fit that to this car, but with the exhaust being so hot, it would have had to wait ages for it to cool down, and you know, every minute I'm here it's costing me money. So Chris said it's best to pull the plug, and I'll try and sort that issue out at home, and then I'll bring it back for Chris to map. Yeah, thanks for everything anyway, Chris.
No problem. It's teething trouble.
Yeah, no, we'll get it sorted. To be continued. Into the weekend, and I'm back round the garage with Esther. Now, I did come round here briefly after work yesterday, and I fitted a different crank sensor, and the car definitely started a lot better than it did when we tried to put it away after the dyno session the other day. Now, I have already warmed the car up today because I wanted to test to see if we're getting the same symptoms as we were on the dyno now that I've fitted a new crank sensor. I'll start her up. Now, it does seem to not sync sometimes, which then means that the engine won't start. Normally, you turn it off, turn it back on, and it works. So I don't know if that's something to do with the problems we was having on the dyno. It normally starts after the second or third time. It's just not syncing at all. And there you see, when it does sync, it starts fine. So what was happening on the dyno when the problem occurred is the lost sync count would rise, and also Chris said that the RPM would momentarily go to 0 as well. So now I'll just rev her up to 5k and we'll see what happens. So as you can see, the lost sync count went up once I brought the revs up. So yeah, it looks like it's doing exactly the same thing as it was on the dyno. Now, I spoke to Matt from Motorsport Electronics yesterday through Facebook, and he actually said that he'd be able to remotely tap into the ECU at some point next week. Don't necessarily need to be on the dyno when he does it, so hopefully he'll be able to see what's going on. And that's actually something that Matt did mention to me months and months ago when I was talking to him about mapping, that he can actually tap into the ECU remotely while I'm on the dyno, but I totally forgot that it said that, and I'm not actually sure whether that would have been possible because obviously the dyno sessions that Chris does are in the evening, and I'm assuming that the Motorsport Electronics guys work during the day. But yeah, huge thanks to Matt for getting in touch. You know, the Motorsport Electronics guys are always really helpful when I have problems, so yeah, I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll just see what Matt says about what's going on. Now, there is one other thing I do want to check at some point, and that is the actual gap between the crank sensor and the flywheel. Now, what I can do is I can remove the starter motor, and then I'm actually able to see and probably even measure with a feeler gauge or something the gap between the sensor and the flywheel. So yeah, I'm going to try that at some point as well, but I'm going to continue this video either once I've had Matt hook up to the ECU to see what he thinks, or when I get round to checking the gap between the crank sensor. So I'll see you in a couple of seconds. Hello, right, into a new day, and I'm round the garage with Esther, and as you can see, I've already jacked her up and I've already removed the starter motor. Now, this means I've got access to where the crank sensor is pointing at the flywheel. I've got these filler gauges here. These add up to 0.75 of a mil. The crank sensor gap needs to be between 0.5 mil and 1 mil, although I will double check that when I get home later. So let's see what kind of gap we've got. Now, up in there, you can just about see the crank sensor poking through. And I'm not going to be able to film myself checking the gap, but I'll do it off camera now. Now, believe it or not, it is actually pretty much exactly 0.75 of a mil, the gap. So it looks like the space between the crank sensor and the flywheel isn't my issue. To be continued. It's occurred to me that I'm not actually sure when I'm going to get a chance to go to Esther's garage during normal office hours, so that the guys at Motorsport Electronics can see what's going on. And I've had loads of you message me over the last few days asking where the dyno video is. Once I have had a chance to call Motorsport Electronics, I'll let you know in a future video what they say. For more up-to-date information about what I'm up to with my cars, feel free to follow me on social media, and I'll leave links to my Facebook page and my Instagram in the description of this video. I want to send a huge thanks out to Che at SWAN Autos for getting Esther to the dyno and back safely. And I want to send a massive thanks out to Chris Todd for gracing her with your tuning expertise. I'll be back soon once I've figured out what's going on with the ECU, and then hopefully we'll finally find out how much power Esther's setup is going to put out. If you did think this video was any good, please do give it a thumbs up and a share. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Click subscribe if you're new and you want to keep up to date with all my future uploads. And as I say, check the links in the description to my social media. You'll also find my email address down there. But other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.